and you get the cookie just when you're about to record and you can't eat it. This is what happened. I got a beautiful Passover cookie. I don't know if I can show it. Maybe I can show it, and I don't know how do I even look, but this is the cookie. Yeah. And today's episode is a spirit of matter. Study with me. So I am Shirley, and I'm dedicating this episode to studying Uranus, Trine, Pluto. So I'm going to look up when did Uranus trine Pluto in the past, and see what was the spirit of the times. So as usual, traditionally revolutionary, I'm going to begin with discussing the vantage of where I'm looking at. So I'm sitting in planet Earth, if you happen to see this from any other planet. And one of the things I already like about this setting is, and are beginning to discuss about any other planet or astrology across the cosmos, is that many things that if a person would say they would be considered out of touch with reality are now becoming mundane reality. Okay, if you would want to ask for insurance in a couple of years, they would ask you, would you want to do it for which planet? Where are you living at? Because we already have upcoming insurances for space. So not knowing which planet you are on can just be a bit of a jet lag. It does not necessarily have to be interpreted as psychosis or whatnot. And immediately when I think about this, before I'll tune to the vantage point, I think about how so many things that we have been interpreting as out of touch with reality are now becoming modern language. Okay, whether it's deep fake of the AI, people who experience non-dual experiences for sure have seen certain experiments with deepfake. You know that all these things are done. Everything you do is done secretly to begin with. Okay, if you have a baby, in the best sense of the world, okay, you have a baby. It's 9 months inside your tummy, and it takes, I think, even 4 months until you see the bump. So if you didn't have ways to test that you are pregnant, you could tell people, I'm pregnant, I feel that I'm pregnant, I feel that I'm pregnant. And people would look at you and say, well, maybe you are a bit psycho. And then it would take 4 months until the bump to begin to show. And they're like, okay, maybe she is not just fat. Maybe she is somehow pregnant, even though we don't know who is the partner that she slept with, okay? And it doesn't have to be Maria and Jesus. It can also be all kinds of circumstances that we now know. People have sex outside of marriage. So, and this is really the best example, okay? When the baby is actually desired and you feel, oh, I have a baby, it is secret. Only the person in the body may sense something. Sometimes they don't sense at all. And only after a while you begin to see the physical manifestation in a way that is visible to the other world. Aquarius is about air signs. So right now Pluto is about the ingress into Aquarius. In 2026 it will trine Uranus, and I want to delve into the Uranus-Pluto trine. Okay, so Pluto entering the sign that is associated with the outer planet Uranus. Whether you believe Uranus rules Aquarius or not, this is the vantage point. And Pluto being an outer planet. And so what happened when Pluto and Uranus harmonized? Okay, they had a conjunction, and the cycles of Pluto and Uranus, and studying them is for another Study With Me episode. This is just about the trine. So they had a conjunction, then they had the square, and I believe the Arab Spring was also already within the square of Pluto-Uranus. Definitely Me Too was in the square of Pluto-Uranus. Uranus and Aries squared Pluto. And now we are heading for the Uranus-Pluto trine, which I believe is not going to be too far from Uranus going over conjuncting Sedna. So there's going to be a discussion with another asteroid there that we need to keep in mind. Now to my vantage point. We are on a Mars day. So Mars day, Tuesday, Mars is ruling Aries and Scorpio, and so it was also a good time to talk about Pluto, which is associated with Scorpio as a ruler, modernly, and Venus hour. So Venus hour is interesting. Venus is value. It can be in a way currency, but not the trade form or the possession form, banking, relationship, relation to women. That's just the vantage point of where I am. So I am a woman speaking about this, Trine from the vantage point of a woman sitting, in on planet Earth. Um, and this is Mars Day, a day of action, a day of initiation. Mars is in Gemini, about to enter Cancer, basically. Sun has ingressed into Aries, so Sun is exalted. It's not triggered by the day or hour. The ascendant is around Algol. Okay, it's 2 degrees from Algol. The ascendant is Venus ruled, is in Taurus, 2 degrees from Algol, so that's interesting. Um, I believe that when I think about the previous time that we had trine between Uranus and Pluto, it was 1922, and I haven't even done the research, but like the Weimar Republic, gender liberation, um, and gender non-duality. Who are the women that we remember from the time later that will show up even more in the Second World War is Marlene Dietrich, and she had both male and female lovers. She was a femme fatale, so challenging the view of a stereotypical gender. Um, and Algol, has to do with the ability of anything that is a woman to speak up, or the ability to speak up, because what Algol went through is not just what women go through, but also what people go through, and to a lesser, unfortunately not a lesser, but a way higher extent, what children go through. Um, so I don't know if there will be a discussion about occult magic. One other thing, I recently had a talk about. There was some, Facebook friend, and she was starting to target me like the pictures that you took with Panda, my stuffy, or with the crocodile after the Me Too, or with the symbol of medicine. Okay, when I was doing holistic medicine. Did you choose that alone? And I was, or the wink, because I was winking in one of the pictures, and it was like, um, well, before you ask me that, tell me what do these symbols mean to you, because I would not be surprised if we interpret these symbols in a completely different way. And one of the things I remember from my childhood, and I see I'm already delving into the trine of Pluto and Uranus, is that I did not know that, for example, the swastika was previously a symbol that was basically balancing the four directions of, like Indian symbols, Eastern symbols, but also Western symbol. Okay, it was the symbol of socialist movements. It was the symbol that you had on the aircraft, where Jews were serving in the aircraft in Germany. Or Prussia, I don't know. And it always symbolized something that is in favor of humanity. And then, of course, Nazis. So they completely inverted the symbol. They created other colors with the symbol. I believe Hitler designed the symbol for the Nazis. And there was a lot of occult involved in inversions. And the use of occult or hidden knowledge in a way that is um, divergent from the light, or and I think even using the word light and dark is not correct, because a lot of what is dark was associated with people who had to escape. So people associate dark magic to witches, where they genuinely were in situations where they had to liberate themselves from like slavery situations. And so it's not, there is no common sense in calling something dark. And the association of colors, think about black and white. If you go to Arabian country, then wearing white at a funeral is the costume. If you go to Greece, it's wearing black. So, or a widowed woman would be expected to wear black, and basically we celebrate all her life in Greece. So, um, that's just a quick association game that is coming up. Before Pluto is in the 29th degree of Capricorn, so it hasn't ingressed into Aquarius yet. Uranus is in 16 degrees Taurus. So Venus ruled Uranus is the vantage point from when I'm presenting the topic. Um, Saturn that rules Pluto is in Pisces, the first degree. We have a bit of a grand trine if we include vertex. So, and the moon is right on my ascendant. When I think about this, it's 24 degrees Pisces. So right on my ascendant, applying to conjunct Neptune, and squaring Mars. So applying to square Mars in Gemini, and applying to trine Lilith. But no, it's grossly applying to trine Lilith. The Sun is more into that Lilith trine here. The Sun is more applying to trine Lilith. So the Moon is squaring Mars. This is a Mars day. And the Moon is applying to sextile Pluto. So it's a good time for me, who is triggered by the, my ascendant is triggered by the Moon conjuncting my ascendant, and to me discussing Pluto, and in this case also Uranus, because Pluto is about to trine Uranus. And it's also about to ingress into my 12th house, which is associated with the modern ruler of Aquarius. And what great way to merge the energies of something that doesn't seem to merge so well, especially when I'm approaching, or basically within, I'm basically already within my Pluto square Pluto phase, because I'm Pluto 0 degrees Scorpio. So what better way is then to see how can I bring the energy of Pluto trine Uranus, or Pluto sextile Uranus. This episode is dedicated to the trine. And how can I how can I see what happens when Pluto and Uranus integrate in a good way? To a lesser extent, you can do that with Saturn. Okay, what happens when Pluto and Saturn are sextiling or trining? What happens? What good things happen? And if you keep that in mind of what happens when these guys rub each other well, then maybe we can bring this wisdom into either a bird eye view, or a sense of understanding what can we do with the tension, so that we can tap into the place where we actually rub each other well. Because there is tension right now. Okay, but Uranus is not having any major aspect with Pluto currently, and it's slowly approaching to trine Pluto. So we are heading towards this energy. We are heading towards a time where two planets of the zeitgeist, two outer planets, two planets of spirit of the times, are creating harmony. And so, anything more about this chart? Venus is in Taurus. Oh, I'm just after yesterday was my Venus return, so I'm doing a Venus return. So yeah, interesting times. And Venus is separating from a square to Pluto. So, my heart goes to you if you all have also had the Venus return that is squaring an outer planet. So, yeah, time of finding my power, finding my voice, I don't know. Those kind of things for the next cycle of Venus. And this is Venus hour. It's in my 3rd house. So of course, I'm being vocal. And the Aquarius that Pluto is about to ingress to is in my 12th house. So this is where and why. This is my motive, or my hidden motive, to do this episode, to see how do I bring in to my life the merging of these energies. And now, without further ado, I'm going to open the prepared page already. This is the most preparedness I did for a Study With Me episode ever. I have the page ready for... That's not useful. It's not this page. Maybe this one. Yes, it's this page. As for the time where Pluto and Uranus trine, and we can go back in history, but I want to go from the more the closest that we have, and the closest that we have is 1922. So my grandmama was born on February 2nd, February 22, 1922. That's the birthday from my grandmother, my deceased grandmother, from my mother's, you know. And the story of the family was that they went from Eastern Europe to Cuba, and at age 6 she got to Israel. Um, so she was a working class. She was chocolatier, but her profession was working class. And then eventually retired. She was forced to retire because she reached the age, and she worked all her life. Um, Very dedicated, a Piscean sun, um, and what I remember and what I ran into during Saturn in my 12th house was the fact that she died from diabetes, and they amputated her legs. So she spent the last years of her life on a wheelchair and having to be in bed. So the value of work, of being too much, of tending to your feet, and I have this do it by feet, and it's entire family. Okay, my family would try to maintain more healthy nutrition and care for our life, but it's also the understanding when I was beginning to be in the age of work, then I had problems to stand on my feet, so I couldn't engage in the working place, and I was forced to do things that more activate my brain, and therefore studying was very important. And they didn't believe my feet problem, even though I was diagnosed by person who looked at the feet, and even though I didn't want to sign unemployment. And so the whole concept of work and the awareness that the way that work is structured, even when you do what you're passionate about, the demands from you in the workforce are a sort of minute working camp where to be healthy you have to be a bit sick, because for me right now I'm on welfare because I was defined mentally sick. Okay, I have CPTSD, but back then they didn't know what it is, and they didn't believe my feet had difficulty to stand, even though if you can watch, I have bunions, I have this is not a feat that can be a waitress. It is not a feat that can be receptionist or whatnot, or any job that you just do for living, so that you can have some time to do creative job if you like to. And so immediately when I saw 1922, so the vantage point is like there is something ancestral that's going on here, surely not just for me. And so just looking at this trine is like, oh, I thought I'm going to see something far away that I'm going to bring into my own life, and now I'm just seeing, no, this is the year that my grandmother was born. And also you can see the tide squares. If she was born on February 22, we have December 27, September 18, and we have February 6. Now if you know that as you go to Uranus and Pluto, they're moving quite slowly. So it was very much in effect when my grandmother was born. And another thing that immediately jumped to my mind is like probably something to do with Weimar Republic, in between two wars. Okay, the time of in between two wars, and this is still Europeocentric, and that a bit synced my heart, because I was like, oh, I can't wait for Pluto and Uranus to match and to have harmonious aspect. And the reason I said that actually had to do with relationships. I was talking about the Venus wisdom on a Venus day, and how Venus hard aspect in Pluto is problematic, Venus hard aspect in Uranus was problematic. and about how outer planets can be related to our relationships, which happens in my chart. And I'm like, I can't wait for Pluto and Uranus to have a harmonious aspect so I can figure out if the possessive, bonding Plutonian side of me could meet the freedom seeking, don't tell me what to do, when to do, with who to do, and with how, and, with how many people to do or not to do. If those sides could meet each other harmoniously, I might have a chance to like imprint that or do some talisman of that, and I like, oh, like maybe I will find my commitment style. Okay, because when you're very Plutonic but also very Uranian, and they don't make any aspects, it's like you're like, I want to be monogamous. Yeah, but what are you gonna do with all these people that you want to have something with, or you want to have the freedom to have something with? I don't know yet. Okay, what do you think about, or I want to be liberated, and I want to allow for things to happen in my life. Okay, what about your desire to be closely bonded with someone, and your difficulty to fall, fall all the way deep in and then be detached, or on the other hand, the sudden detachment that happens. So it's very relational. Okay, and if I look at at relations, at what was, the type of art we had during the Weimar Republic, very liberating relationship, gender, all these things were not so stereotyped, and it was so unfortunate that later we would have World War II. And who were the first to go? Just the people who were free, in during the Weimar Republic. So my heart sinked a bit when I realized that this beautiful trine was in between two wars. Okay, but basically, what does it mean? It was in between the square and the opposition, or in between the conjunction and the square. Because when do we have, no, this is a sextile, in between opposition and square. Okay, and that's the nature of a trine. Okay, it's in between opposition and square, and um, but the trine, the spirit of the trine preserves itself, but it becomes, especially with the effect of Neptune, a point of longing to the trine, longing to the sextile. So let's just take a look at the chart of 1922. This is February 6, 1922. And it's the first time I'm seeing this chart. So this is absolutely a study with me episode. And I like to have them in that way, where we are exposed to the knowledge together. Well, the point, immediately I look at the moon. The moon in this chart is actually pointing, grabbing Mars, opposing to Mars. So Mars is in Scorpio here, and this is a Mars day. So I'm not surprised that I picked this chart. Pluto here is in Cancer, and Uranus is in Pisces. No, yes, Uranus is in Pisces. So Uranus was in Pisces, and Pluto was in Cancer, both in water signs, both in a place that is unusual for them, because Pluto we associate it more with Scorpio, and funnily enough, it's quite in a good position in Capricorn too, because what do we need, like, what is more fitting than a gradual regeneration of structure, as at the times that Pluto goes through Aquarius, and everybody is being exposed to the structure that needs to be deconstructed. So I'm not saying Pluto is exalted in Capricorn, but it definitely had like a job to do. This very reasonable to, like, the only antidote for Saturn going wrong is a Pluto deconstructing it. And Uranus is, like I said, is more associated with the air, with space, with downloads, with claircognizance, okay, the innate knowing of something. And here in Pisces, so we see immediately spirit of the times, where Uranus is emphasizing artistic endeavors. So think about Pisces is very creative. I also think about the type of filmmaking that was done during those times that has something unusual to it. Maybe the type of art, then we will need to do the research and see deeply what happens. And Pluto Cancer is exposing the dark side of the family. And the family can be the motherland, and the value of the family. So there's desire to control the family. There's the Cancer that protects his familial loved ones, and that's it. So it's the birth of nationalism. Yeah, it's literally the birth of nationalism. So we went away from great empires to the beginning of the birth of what would be the nation state. Pluto also exposes the dark sides of the family. Um, how would that be pronounced? The dark sides of, well, the dark side of nation state is too early to say, but you think about later ideologies that emphasize the value of the family, or the Irish family. If we talk about Europe, the Irish family, and the desire to clean. Also, when you think about any Orthodox group of any religion or non-religion, there's the desire to be a bit purebred, the desire to exclude, which often leads to neurodegenerative ailments when people marry their cousins. Then, or when, the fear to immerse in other cultures, so not to lose something sacred, tradition or whatnot. While it is understood, people want to preserve their identity, Uranus and Pisces, having a revolution of identities. Um, it, it is also the fact that if you keep intercoursing within those who are too near to you in the DNA, neurodegenerative ailments, okay, DNA related ailments begin to emerge, and also certain DNA mutations begin to emerge. But those mutations are just an attempt of your DNA to create divergence so that you will not die, so your species will not die, because if you stay stagnant for too long, then you become neurodegenerative. And when you want neurodivergence, this is why when people talk about neurodivergent people, so some of it is a trauma associated, but neurodivergence is also seeing the world from a different point of view. Neurodivergence is also paying attention to being so sensitive to what needs to be changed in society. Think about Gen Zers. Um, so if you watch a short, about Gen Z, one of the things you watch Gen Z in looking for a workplace. So the human resources person asks them, like, what are your credentials? And the Gen Z asks, why are you looking for employees? Is it that many people leave here, leave the spot? Are many people exhausted of you? Do you like abuse people at the workplace? It's like flipping that, and uh, and 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 that is being called rebellious. That is being called neurodivergent in the best of cases, or a person that can't get along with this traditional, society. Um, so the plenty of supposed outcasts in society began to have a mainstream culture that we now honor as the songs, the filmmaking, the arts that we hear, that created a familial or a family of divergent people back in 1922. This is immediately, when I watch, and so I see that this is happening between Cancer and Pisces. Do we have? Let's take a look, because we also have it in 1921, and this also is Cancer and Pisces. So it's tagging along between the Cancer and Pisces. Let's go to the December one. Yeah. So it ranges between the 6 degrees to 10 degrees of Pisces and Cancer. And this is 1922. What I would like to do is to open another window and begin to search what happened on these days in the world. Because the tides, like, the exact aspect is sure to yield something. Now, because it is harmonious aspect, is something that you can tap into. It's not a hard aspect like manifesting aspect. If you look at the Uranian astrology, for example, you only look at the planets and the aspects between them, and you only look at the hard aspects. And any field of concrete astrology will target the hard aspects because those are manifesting. Unlike them, the harmonious aspect denote of what is possible. You need to activate them, you need to tap into them. It's something that you can do with this energy. But it's not something that's just going to happen to you. You may feel that something is going more smoothly, more easily, and then it's good to be aware of those easier aspect or more harmonious, because there's nothing easy about Pluto meeting Uranus. So let's begin from 27th December 1922 in the world. So, yeah, 27th December 1922. A bank holiday. Okay, that's very interesting. Not 2022. Oh, they're going to 2022. Oh, I need 1922. Yeah, different initials. So Japanese aircraft carrier Hosho was commissioned, the first ship designed from the beginning to be a carrier ship. So carrier ship, of course, it's not cargo, it is of battleships. So we have, not surprisingly enough, so this is a ship that is already, a technology that help us to move on water. And it is supposed to carry, things that carry bombs. So this is also facilitating, if I take Uranus in Pisces, it's facilitating aircrafts. Um, so something that is usually in the air, facilitating aircraft's motion across the sea. So carrying, I believe that that was already aircrafts. So about record break in Shaila, the high flying aviator, April 27, 1922. End of Ottoman Empire, November 1st, 1922. Soviet Union founded. So these things happening around that date. So they were in the shade of this trine. So we have dissolution, because if we take Pisces as the spirit of the times, we're talking about Neptune. We're not talking about Jupiter. Jupiter is personal planet here, relative to these outer planets, okay? So there can be a Jupiterian effect of something, but when I want to see what is the zeitgeist, I look to the outer planet. It's easier. You can get it with the personal planets, but it's just going to take you a lot more calculations. And so immediately I think about the dissolution of empires, and in favor of, what is Soviet Union? Okay, it's a union is something that we will also know as to employees unionize, people unionize, while empire is more Regulian, more solar. And of course, we're going from the phase of Uranus being in Aquarius and then being in Pisces. So Pisces is the dissolution of something. And that can also denote that what we see, if Aquarius is the sign of revolutionary things, or installation of mass control of people, that they are act as a synthesis to the synthesis is a change of decentralization. Okay, the thesis is the decentralization, but the thesis and antithesis, or sorry, the synthesis is decentralization. But this is a synthesis. Okay, it's a process that is gradual. It's a 20 years process we're heading to with Pluto and Aquarius. where there are, there can be a thesis of mass control and surveillance, or a thesis of mass revolting. So the synthesis between mass revolution and mass control of the people is decentralized regime, right? But the dissolution of the great empires is happening in Pisces, because Pisces is Neptune. Neptune is dissolving things. Um, there is a certain fall, but the actual dissolution and the foundation of something new that is more Neptunian, is more union, but it can also yield an illusion, okay, an illusion of unionization. Um, and all of these things happen when there is a harmonious aspect between Uranus and Pluto. So there is a beginning of something new and a dissolving of the old. Um, what else? So aviation, high flying aviator, record breaking high flying aviator. April 27, 1922, I would not be surprised if Uranus was still in Aquarius. But then, if we have these high flying aviators and they can throw bombs, then we would need to carry them across the ocean. And Uranus in the ocean, in the great vast, will facilitate the type of ships that can carry an airplane. So that's the technological developments that are related to Uranus. Pluto are also the technology of being able to transport or teleport that which is Plutonian. So it can be bombs, but it can also be compost. It can also be energy that is hybrid energy between not just solar, but hydrogen energy and the energy of feces, because in Germany we have buildings that are run energetically by burning feces. And you need water, you need to liquidify that, okay, or you need to dehydrate. So those technologies to do with Plutonian things and being able in Pisces back then to teleport them. Uh, what else? Christchurch. There are newspapers, so that is very interesting. National Library of New Zealand, a newspaper from 1922. Births, marriages, deaths. Okay. So there are articles. So this is the issue of 27 December 1922 of a magazine called Star Christchurch. So it's a religious magazine in, I think, is it New Zealand? I don't know. Instead, so this birth, marriages, deaths, births, and deaths. And let's see if there is anybody that we can recognize from today. So they would tell the births and deaths in the newspaper, which is fascinating. I don't see, let's see, deaths. Yeah. So they just tell that the names of the people who died at the time. Okay. Advertisements. Let's just take a look at the random advertisement from the time. S&A Irwin, property salesman. So deposits wanted to sell. Okay, so the advertisements are about selling things. It's just fascinating historically. And look at the prices. It's here in florine, a pound. So this is the coinage they used. 4-roomed house with 34 acres, and this is not for rent, huh? It is for £1,000 back then. I don't know how much money it was. So this is how you could buy property. Colombo Street. So these are the sales, land, buying land, Findlay. Okay, so those are advertisements. Let's see another column of advertisement. Public notices, small goods, fresh daily. Patents obtained throughout the world. Cybril Cablion Quotels, I don't know what are all. Patent attorney and consulting electrical engineer. So these are public notices. I don't know what does it say here. Is it just advertising for the lawyer who is registering patents? Now I predict patents are going to be a big issue, because when you produce something, when you engineer something, there are so many patents that you have to register for the company just to get across. I don't know if that would be eased, or I definitely predict some changes in the way we relate to patents. Think about the medical field, right? If you have a herb that you find out is doing something good, that it's going to be patented and only used for a certain pharmaceutical company to process the shit out of it, and by the way, make it almost useless. But you will not be able to grow this herb. You will not be able to consume this herb. It will be patented, and then the medication is so expensive and is utterly useless because it's been processed to the I don't know what, and so you lose the benefit of something. On the other hand, you do want to have patents if you came up with a certain invention, okay, and you want to have dividends. So you want to be appreciated. You don't want that to be taken away from you. So we need to consolidate various interests and not give in to the interests of those who are largely in power at the expense of the individual. Or of certain individuals at the expense of the people. Astute buyer, Graham billing, mechanical engineering. So this is the type of advertisements we see here. Racing and trotting. This is sports, tennis. If you're into that type of historical knowledge. Illustration untitled. Let's see the illustration. Oh, we have a comics, but I can't read it. I'm gonna pass it along to Bud. I can hardly read what it says. But it is, yeah, maybe you can read it. Yeah, it looks like really fun, so you can have, if you want me to leave, I don't think I can write a message in my own, no, I cannot write a message in my own live, so I cannot put the link. What happened? I don't know what happened. Okay, is it that? No. Let's do it again. Oh, we actually have the link, so no problem. Working men's club, sport caterings, North Beach gala, boxing, big cricket, cycling, bowling, German reparations. What does that mean? An American scheme. So this is an interesting something to read. German reparations and American. So we are, 1922. We are after the First World War, and before the Second. And so the First World War for Germany ended when no American soldier or foreign soldier was on German land, and Germany just decided to end it peacefully and maintain its dignity. Very American word, but it's kind of like maintaining its dignity. And so the sense of the spirit of the times was that Germany did not lose the war, okay? And some people did not understand, why did Germany give in? when they were like it wasn't even conquered. So that will dramatically alter the strategic decisions in the Second World War, where Germany would be completely and utterly conquered, so much so that it would have to rely on both American and Soviet hands to recover financially. Um, so, German reparations, an American scheme. What does that mean? I don't know. So they're talking about New York, December 25, National Secretary of the League, which during the war aided the government extensively in the maintenance of the national morale, has submitted to President Harding and Congress plan prepared by a member of the League who is a lawyer with experience in international affairs for settlement of the reparations question. So I believe they are talking about the U.S. aiding Germany to repair. I'm not sure. The chief provisions of the plan are the creation of Federal Reserve Foreign Bank of the United States with a branch in Berlin. So there's the U.S. bank wants to open a branch in Berlin after the First World War. Um, thank you. Thank you so much. So it's already very fascinating because Germany just gave in to the United States, right? You know, like Germany, and imagine that you're having a war, and I don't think it was already splendid isolation, but you're having a war, and then the country that you were fighting with wants to open a branch of a bank, of the United States Bank, in your capital city. You know, Berlin. I don't think Berlin was the capital city by then. I think it was still Bonn, but because Berlin was conquered, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm confusing between two wars. Um, but imagine the situation, and so it seemed possible, you know. But it can also be very humiliating experience. Like it can be a business opportunist thingy or a humiliating experiment. And so you can understand how a country like, you know, Germany might see this initiation by the United States as A, humiliating, and B, a scheme. Like, hey, they only wanted, like they were only fighting for the money, and they were only trying to get their business on our land without providing. So they did it through war, and then supposedly, you know, showing us as the ones who give in, the one who needs saving. This is already a Neptunian thing, huh? The one who needs saving. It's like, oh, you treat us like we are the poor souls that need to be saved by America, and you open a bank in our capital city. But hey, no soldier, like none of your soldiers was on the land when we decided to end this conflict. So that is a very potently, dramatically difficult situation. Okay, um, Germany of the First World War was not Nazi Germany, and absolutely Weimar Republic was not, you know, Nazi Germany. Um, Definitely there was racism, then definitely there was ableism, definitely there was anti-Semitism, nothing that does not exist anywhere around the world. Um, so yeah, for settlement of the plan are the creation of Federal Reserve Foreign Bank in the United States, with a branch in Berlin, with authority to issue gold secured on the dollar currency in Germany, which would be available for transaction in gold in connection with international and external commerce. So this is something very interesting because from the vantage point, let's say you are the United States and you're opening this bank in Berlin, it can also be an act of giving. It's like, hey, we're going to store our gold in your capital city. So like we're actually heading towards genuine repairing of the relationships. Like, no, we don't want to be your enemy. Like, we're going to store part of our gold by you, and we're going to let you safeguard this gold of an American branch. So you think about how the point of view can be, hey, like you were fighting to get your business in here and to try to control our own finances versus no, I'm putting these reserves in your country so that we can have a business common ground, that we are now allies. Okay, we are now allies. You store some of my gold. I trust you with some of my gold. Okay, and there's a branch of my country in your country, and that is something that makes us, repair or allies, and that can be seen both as a scheme, as an illusion of some harmony there, and thinking about banking, the storing of gold, the safe as something that is partially also Plutonian, but also think about Berlin is not a little town back then. It's, um, the most important city in Germany. Okay? Das ist Berlin, naja, hat sie im Mittelpunkt der Welt, okay, in the middle point of the world. Okay, so God laid Berlin in the middle point of the world. This the song Berlin, Berlin. So we have all these points of view, but also a certain act that is coming to bridge the relations in an unusual way, to some extent. Liquidity, okay, but it's not liquidity because we have solid gold that's supposed to be there. Whose gold is it, huh? But that's another question. Connection with the internal and external commerce, and the acceptance by Germany of a proposal to pay $12,500,000. I see more zeros here, so it's a billion probably, in reparation to the Allies. Germany, at the same time, is to pay the Allied debt to the United States, now totaling for another 12,500,000,000 dollars. So it's good for me to get used to big amounts of money. Just seeing them, passing through my eyes is not bad. But here, so Germany is declared in debt, but the United States opens a branch in Germany and stores gold there. I don't know exactly what it is, and so you could say this is a scam, or this is an attempt to have peace. And the question of how much should Germany be held accountable. Now, what would eventually come out, is a tremendous financial struggle for Germany. So the United States was being emotionally, the result of the action, okay, I'm not saying the intention, but the result of the action, the United States was being intensely violent financially with Germany for an attempt perhaps to establish power, to make sure that they don't rebel. But the feeling of Germany was like, hey, we have to pay so much debt and financial crisis as a result of that. And we didn't even lose the war. Like, what do they want in this sense of like, hey, we didn't even lose the war. There was no American soldier on German land. And now they want us to pay all this, and so this gives rise. And unfortunately, we see that happening also in other countries, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's the Far East, whether it's Africa to some extent, where the steps that are being made, and I don't describe intention here, because there are various intentions of various people, but the steps that are being made to create peace in the area are yielding a certain sort of disempowerment that will later will serve as a fertile ground for terror. What is Hitler but a terrorist, right? okay, and unfortunately rather successful one. But what is Hitler but a terrorist? He was not coming from Germany, was not looking Irish. He was, whether not intentionally or not, playing on a certain type of insecurity, certain type of need that to restore dignity. When you think about this, to restore the need to restore dignity was met in the most unhealthy way. And Hitler would not have come to rise and to be able to do what he did in 39 if not for his ability to rehabilitate Germany financially in 1936. Okay? And so some researchers said that if he died in 1936, he would go down as one of the best leaders alive in history, or at least in modern history, because he managed to restore Germany from financial debt. And and that is something that it is important to keep in mind, and how this, to lesser extent or not to lesser extent, this act of creating tremendous depth and tremendous destruction within a country, and then supposedly having this, eventually it serves the fact that the United States can survive with its national debt of a third world country as a first world country at the end of the day. But that too collapses, and that is something. This is something any empire will need to remember. Any aspiring nation or aspiring entity or populace will need to remember, because you can't sustain yourself on abuse. You can't sustain yourself on disempowerment of the other person. Eventually, there's a certain sort of relations where people need to find their power, and social entities need to find their power. And this, if your power is lying, you're not a free man if you even have the need to disempower people. And that's the genuine phase of standing in power. Yeah. So this is on the news. We have this awareness. So the Trine here, if I look at it, if I try to interpret what I'm seeing, and I'm glad that I found immediately Germany and United States. So between two hard aspects, basically between two wars. What is happening is that eventually how shall I say it? There is already the awareness within the Trine. There is already the awareness that leads into the next conflict, and the resolution of, hey, we weren't in that much of a disempowered situation to begin with, or we were there is an attempt, there is it's a harmony, and within the root of the harmony is also the root of the next conflict. So there is the seed of the previous conflict blooming into something that can somehow be maintained for a while until we have another conflict. And when it is Pluto in Aquarius, we have it around technology. I see we have it around technology and banking. Pluto in Cancer is definitely the nation state and the perception of the nation state. The state is a family. If you have, what is the sentence? Don't ask what you did for your what the country did for you. Ask what did you do for your country. That we can now look at, as post Mussolini, we can look at it as a fascist statement. When you think about the country as a body, and you think about yourself as some cell in this body that die. You will die, but the country will stay. We can now look at it as not just imperialist, but also fascist. Okay, in fascism, the country was carpal. And unfortunately, some of the social contract thinkers, like Thomas Hobbes with Leviathan, and to another extent Rousseau, with the greater good. We're talking about things that could yield both power to the people and a sense of connection and a sense of freedom of movement, perhaps, and alternatively, interpretations that are darker, okay, of the country, of the nation state as a body that you serve, okay, that you sacrifice for. And you don't even ask what it did for you. You ask, what do you do for that? Okay? And so there is a certain revolutionary view of the nation state, rejuvenation of the cellular rejuvenation of the nation state. And the nation state is like this family, and the value of the family, where like you would die for your loved ones, you would die for this. You don't ask what did my parents do for me, what did my spouse did for me. You know, you would die to save them. You don't even think about it. And when that family becomes the nation state, then that is the behavior that is going to be manifested as a result of that. Okay? Uranus with Pisces gives us a more global sense. So we have the spring of nation states. We will have, even to a deeper extent, after the Second World War, but the spring of and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Okay, right now the Soviet Union is only forming. But definitely the roots of the spring of the nations is already seated here. And there's nothing like banking to get you to identify, relate, or reject entities. Okay, when you know, when it's what is money time? With Pluto ingressing to Aquarius, and a new concepts of time, then what is money time? What is the money time? Okay, and the money time is where it's all get real. You can have you can have an extramarital affair. You can be a part of I don't know, a cult. You can be a part of this. The money time is, okay, you are signing your will now. Who will inherit the money? Okay, so the money time is both about the money, about the survival, the resources that we need to survive, the fresh water, Cancer, and Pisces, the sense of connection, Pisces, and to a lesser degree, Cancer, and the money is not only the money. The money is like, okay, we've been so close, why do I only get this part? And so the money time becomes a question. And this is just the article that we've seen. It's like, this is the money time of the relations between Germany and the United States. We get to keep your gold, but we have to pay to debt for you. So do you really care? And do not be surprised if that is an external relation policies question. And I can tell you an anecdote, because this calls for an anecdote. I was going to look at mattresses the other day, and there was a chair there, and I was sitting. It was very comfortable. It was very expensive, a designer chair, and there was where you lean your back, okay, where you lean your back, there was the flag of the United States, but when you lay your bottoms, there was the flag of Britain. And I told to the person at the store, I said, I really like this chair, but I don't think I can put it in my house, because if any British or American comes there, or if any British person comes there to visit me, then they might get insulted. You'd be surprised how intense those little details can yield a conflict, how intensely they can yield a conflict, and how intense the conflict is when somebody gets insulted in an international meeting. If you remember the chair, I don't remember if it was in Turkey, if it was in Israel, if it was in the United States, one person got a chair that was lower. Now, it can very well be that those were the chairs that were in the place. And one, they didn't have a chair, so they found a chair, and the chair was lower. Okay? But imagine the fiasco on an international level where you're a diplomat and you now have to sit on a lower chair. And imagine if that is even intentional. Okay? So those things that we think of, what, such big countries, so many, look at how many billions. Okay, what 120 billion or 12 billion at the time, and so many billions running through, and over how high was the chair? We're going to have like a conflict, a war now. Yes, yes. And I'm not even talking about the murder of Franz Ferdinand, which began the First World War, and the allies associated with it. But even something as simple as, the chair that you're sitting on, as a small insult that people think, this can be a world war. The joke that becomes real. And by the way, as Uranus is approaching Mercurial sign, as Uranus is approaching Gemini, we may have the joke that becomes real sparking up. Although there would be a trine with Pluto, but that can very well seed in the hard aspect. Heat in Australia, communism in the USA. So, a new organization. Okay, we're talking about just the beginning of the Soviet Union on the basis of ideology, and this is identity. Okay, if we talk about Uranus in Pisces, then Uranus in Pisces was Uranus is about the people, or the people en masse. Pisces is about dissolution of boundaries between the people. Uranus is about ideology. Pisces about maritime relations, so maritime borders, maritime, how do you have a maritime border? And how do you not cross it? And what happens when you cross it? Because practically, if you're sailing a ship and there's a storm, you're gonna have to navigate, and you can navigate in and out of boundaries very easily, especially when those are maritime boundaries and the ocean carries you to a certain way. And between the continents, we have Bermuda Triangle, we have the Pacific, the Pacific part of the ocean that's even worse than Bermuda Triangle, or so difficult to cross. And then you're like, oh, you saved the life of your ship, but lo and behold, you're in the boundaries of your enemy state. What do you do now? Okay, and how do you enforce that, and so on and so forth. So the liquidity of borders and the liquidity of the people en masse, this can also denote a lot of human trafficking. So all of that in a certain sort of rapport with the nuclei of the nation state, the beginning of the nuclei of the nation state. So what happens when the ideology, Uranus, is of unity that is across any country? Because communism is not the national ideology. Okay, both the National Socialism, Nazis, and I'm not talking about the horrors that they did, I'm talking about the ideology now. Okay, the National Socialism, so socialism for the people of your nation. The National Socialism is just the result of the union of, unfortunately, of Pluto in Cancer and Uranus in Pisces. It's like, yes, we like this communism, yes, we like this socialism, but we want to have this for our people first. Or the almost absurd, and I'm third generation. I believe we are all third generation to these wars. Yeah, second and third generation, and there are some people who are first generation right now. So there is the Judaic saying of Aniyei Ircha Kodmim, which is the poor people of your city come first, when you come to care for people, care to the poor people that are here around, to the people of your city. And national socialism or national communism or anything of that sort is the attempt to do socialism, the attempt to do communism for the people of the nuclei of your family, and on an international level, the nation state. Okay? And so what happens when that nation state and the other opposite nation state, okay, the Soviet Union and the United States, both are unions of states, unions of countries. What happens when they have one ideology and the ideology begins to mix? There's the fear, the imminent fear, Pluto, that the borders of the nation state will dissipate. Just right now, when we talk about globalization, so the fear of globalization in tandem with the desire to experience the global unity. Okay? Think about the universal income as means of control. You will own nothing and be happy. Of course, people are very happy at the working camps all across the board, Germany, United States, China, Russia, and whatnot. Versus, what if the person who, the families of the children who mine my rose quartz in Madagascar would get the same $20 that a teenager gets when they go to work for McDonald's? What if we just started with that basis, okay, that those children would get the same $20 that you get in the United States for working for McDonald's? What if they got the same working conditions, okay? What if the children that mine my Madagascar vanilla, that grow and crop my Madagascar vanilla, would get the same labor conditions that you'd get if you're working in the Netherlands as a citizen? And if you are worn out, and you can say, I'm worn out, and for 2 years you're not working, because they understand that if they have to pay for your burial, they don't have a labor force, and if they have to pay for your hospitalization, it costs the same money as you will sit at home and travel and do whatever you like. Get the money, do something good with it, go back to work. It's utilitarian, okay? They're not angels. Okay, as a person from the municipality of Netherlands told me directly, it's like, we are no angels, okay? But they have the intelligence that they understand. They will pay money anyway. If they have to bury you, if they have to take care of you in welfare, if they have to take care of the crimes that you do, no, sit at home. You will want to work. You will want to do something that you're passionate about anyway. Okay, what if? So we take the concept of universal working labor, and universal income as something that can both be used to control people and disown them of the ability to make a life while making a living, liberty and dignity, and as the potential of people actually being intelligent and understanding that, hey, even to evacuate a lot of body, you do need people. And when you have the sense of connection and understand all people are people, everyone is a human being. Yeah, I just saw, short of prisoners in the United States receiving cats and taking care of the cats, and if they behave well, they get to own the cats. So you see how everybody merged with the cats and started caring for them and began to develop this sense of connection. They're like, well, I'm not going to lose my cat, so I'm better, work and buy. Now, if you're working and you can buy food for your cat and you can buy food for yourself, then you have hope. You begin to have faith in the labor market. But if you're working and you're not making enough to buy money for your cat, oh my God, I do not envy of your boss, especially if you were a prisoner before, yeah? So these are all these thoughts that we are dealing with today. Pluto is about to go Aquarius, and Uranus is about to go Gemini. Okay, so social conflict. Back then, it was the nuclei of the family, the nation state as the family. You're caring for the family. You're not serving in an army for the empire anymore. You are serving in an army for your country. Okay? And you don't ask, what did your country do for you? You ask what you do for your country. Okay? And that creates a certain border where suddenly you have, the communism from that state is now here. So we have commies, which will be the blacklist. And let's go to this article. The Telegraph Press Association, and it's funny as I think about it. I had the idea of doing astrology, political science as like teaching political science and integrity in astrology, and I didn't even notice up until now that I'm doing just that in this episode. So yeah, that's interesting. Thing just happened. Why not allow it to be? New York, December 25. So this is 2 days before it was when the angle was applying, okay, and the 27th is the exact trine between Uranus and Pluto. The New York Workers' Party of America claiming, was Pluto on the sun of the United States? Because the sun is in Cancer for the United States, and I know Russia is very much Neptune ruled. So, hey, you can, if you're interested in having, corresponding video or reaction video, then why not? New Yorkers Party of America, New York Workers Party of America. This is important. Claiming a membership of 300,000 and asserting that it is successor to the LWW here. I have no idea. What did I just read? You can help me there. At the convention adopted a program calling for dictatorship of the proletariat, and it has been a while since I've seen this term, in the United States, and replacing the present government by a Soviet program. Both the text and the spirit of the program are most revolutionary of any organization in this country for many years. One provision calls for the support of the International of Moscow, so the Internationale. Sorry, I got to know this from German. And endorses the policy of boring from within, harbor unions, I don't know, in order to bring them within the folds of communism. So, if you do not take care of your employees, of the people who feed you, they go elsewhere to unionize. And this is just this article, communism in the United States. We already see more than the seeds of the Cold War in that. And how does this leaking of boundaries, threatening the nation state nuclei boundaries, and the core of the nation state, right? If you don't ask what your country did for you, you ask what you do for your country. And suddenly you have a group of people who are very well questioning, how am I appreciated when I'm in labor, when I'm working? Am I appreciated? Okay, and so there is another ideology that's competing and threatening the nuclei of your family. So now people start asking, what am I doing for my country, and what am I receiving? How am I being nurtured by my family? This is also the seeds of psychological, the family therapy. Like, hey, did I get the care that I deserved, or did I get the care that I needed from my parents? And if so, how do I receive this care right now? How do I tend to my inner child? Yeah, the roots of tending to my inner child on a psychological level, Pluto is also psychology. Tending to my inner child, maybe I didn't get the care from the parents because they were, Second World War survivors, First World War survivors, and now I have to find a ways to nourish my own inner child before I grow on. Okay, that's also the seeds of that. Japanese Navy, Christmas rose in the United States, Indian Congress. So let's look at something that's a bit not so Western centric. So Indian Congress, question for discussion. The Telegraph. So this is London, December 25. A Gaya Bengal correspondent reports that the National Congress meets on December 26. Interest in the Congress centers on the question of whether non-cooperators should seek elections to the legislative councils at the 1923 elections. This is where I read out loud, and I need to read what I read. Um, Non-cooperators should seek elections at the legislative. So it's like coming up with new elections. The question, should we have another election? On this point, all attempts to at compromise have so far been abortive. Okay, so there's this inner turmoil within India. A subject committee by a narrow majority adopted a resolution to be submitted to the Congress to report within 2 months that British goods can be successfully boycotted. Okay, so they're talking about a boycott. And boycotting British goods. If you think about the economy, so making the economy more national and the desire to not rely so much on international markets, and the understanding that the root of colonialism is commerce, and so independence and autonomy are also economical, and a boycott of the country that conquered you is a natural result. That is not something I can easily delineate from this trine. But there's this inner electional, this inner transition, inner transformation, perhaps an act of rebelling Britain in a way, and not relying on Britain economically. So this can actually be one of the positive manifestations of Pluto in Cancer. We want to have a local economy. We want to make sure we don't rely on the products of those who disempowered us financially. So it will take time before we can reestablish commerce relations, because we need to be able to sustain. And when you're able to transport goods by ships, perhaps in a safer way or safeguards these ships, then you don't have to rely on Britain. There are many nations growing, and so there are many economies available, or new oceans, blue oceans, literally. Shipping, mail notices, colts and crickets, peace in Ireland. What's more Uranus Pluto harmony than peace in Ireland? Sinn Féin's move. So, Dublin reports state that a meeting of Sinn Féin. Oh my God. Anybody who studied with me politics and governance and watching this can laugh at me. I don't care. Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin, Sinn Féin clubs carried resolutions urging the convocation of a national Sinn Féin Congress to arrange peace within the Free State. Okay, so this sounds like, the days of the Messiah, when you think about Ireland, and Ireland being a free state and Ireland being at peace, which is another prediction for those trine relations. Civil unrest as well as international unrest is being tackled with more diplomatic efforts. There is a bit of a status quo, a new status quo, but within the peace there is the root of the conflict. Within the conflict there is also the root of the peace, because it's just dynamic balance that happens. Vengeance of Greeks. What's that? Publicly degraded. So this is Athens in December 26. Admiral Goudas and General strategos were publicly degraded in fulfillment of sentence passed at the same time that Gonaris and others were condemned to death. I'm not sure who fought who. I don't know who these people are. Graded in fulfillment of the sentence. It's like two people were condemned to death. So they were publicly degraded. If you think about this, the Pluto and Aquarius and the invention of the guillotine and publicly sentencing people to death by, hanging or by guillotine, sort of death in front of the masses, unfortunately, can also be a resolution. Also during those harmonious aspects, and I don't know why Greece, why, like that is a whole episode. Like, this is, if you are into learning about this, then you can make an episode about this. If that was my course, then this could be somebody's essay. City planning in America. City planning. So, looking a century ahead. Improving great cities. Increasingly the minds of American people. So people talk about city, the Melbourne age. People of other lands they have discovered that are in the buildings of their cities, changes that might easily and cheaply have been provided for will ease enormously if made now. So people are visiting other countries and they're like, hey, we'd like to have that in our city as well, or we'd like to plan the cities. The great cities like Boston, New York, and Chicago and San Francisco have come into prominence largely from their strategic commercial positions, although in some cases, for as example Chicago, the energetic character of the first settlers has been the determining factor. Energetic character of the first settlers. What the heck does that mean? Practically all the cities of America, however, have, like Topsy, just grown up. The narrow and winding streets of Boston, for example, followed by the lines and paths made by the cows of the first comers in the 17th century. No one seems to have known in early life any particular city that multitudes would soon be busy at the particular spot. Therefore, cities grew up without much design. So they kind of noticed that, our metropolis has grown and it is looking fairly disordered. I don't have a delineation for that. I don't know why cities. It sounds like a Gemini thing to me, but I don't know. In the growth of the cities, specifics have been met as they have arisen and generally not before. I want to go back for 1 second to the chart itself that I was looking at. First of all, let's see, where's Neptune? Neptune in Leo. I'm not making any aspects to these two. What's in Gemini? Nothing. Where's Mercury? Well, Mercury opposing Pluto in Capricorn, so changing the structure of city. Okay, you see that? Mercury here, 16 degrees Capricorn, and Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. This is structures. Mercury is also to do with civil things, so metropolis, the city, the big city is mercurial, and the opposition to Pluto is like, hey, there's a need. We grown up so much, there's a need to rejuvenate the structure. So Pluto opposing Capricorn from Cancer is also denoting structural changes. And now we have a planet here Mercury. Oh, so changes in trade, changes in cities, civil changes, civil structure transformation, trade structure transformation. Okay, and that's just the 27th of December. Here Mars is with Uranus, so yeah, this is why I did that to begin with. And I could go on and on. Um, but we mainly get where the world was, and we mainly get the combination of seeds of conflict and residues of conflict being mitigated for a while. There's a process. It's like in between, like literally in between conflicts. And this is not just in between two world wars. It's the nature of the cycle of the planets. If the planet is conjuncting, later sextiling, later squaring. Okay? Then trining, later opposing. In between, there is also the inconjunct. Yeah. Um, so this is how the dynamic balance of many factors happens simultaneously all the time. Yeah, this is why astrology is so good for a model of non-linear systems that are dynamic in balance, and are held apart and together by changes in gravitational frequencies. If the Indian word the graha for the planets, they take Adam Ellenbus for teaching about the notion of the planets as grabbers, okay, from of ancient Indian astrology. So what is graha? What is to grab? How do you grab if you're a planet? You're so far away. How do you grab? You grab with gravitational field. Okay, you're making an impact on the gravitational field by just being, and whatever is around you is being grabbed, and also you are being grabbed. Let's go a bit earlier to September 18, 2022. Pluto in Cancer, 11th degree, Uranus, 11th degree. So Uranus is retrograde. And we have a grand trine with Venus here, Venus in Scorpio. International, like this screams international relations to me. So let's look at what the heck happened. Because although this is a grand trine, there is a potency of diplomacy here. Women relations. Oh, how was feminism doing back then? I don't know. 17 September 1922. 17 September 1922. So, Kansas City. We're back in Kansas. Kansas City Speedway held its inaugural race, won by Tommy Milton. The race was marred by tragedy when driver Roscoe Scarlers, who had finished second in the 1921 Indianapolis 500, was killed by a fiery crash. Yikes. I don't have a delineation for that. Wait with that. What happened in September 1922? Cyclist Pete Moscow becomes the world sprint champ. Radio Moscow begins transmitting. So, radio broadcast, messages and mass. Okay, Uranus is messages and mass. 12 kW's most powerful station. Birthdays. So, President of Angola is born. A British geneticist and bacteriologist, a profession that will become fiercely important in both the good and the bad of it. So Naomi Data, British geneticist and bacteriologist, pioneer in investigating the development of resistance to antibiotics by bacteria, born in London. Ursula Howells, British actress. Hard Times Girly Murder is announced, born in London. Okay, these are the days they died. Shit. So this woman died in 2008 when Pluto re-entered Capricorn. I don't know what's her chart, but that's interesting to note. When we talk about societal structures changing, and societal changes are very much related to hygiene, and racism, unfortunately. So day of the week, Sunday. 100 years, 6 months, 3 days. Leap year, no. Greatest generation. Dog. Chinese zodiac, star sign, Virgo. Okay. What happened? Record-breaking Sheila, the high-flying aviator. Oh, wait. So it's not the vehicle, it's her. Oh, so it's a pilot. And this is something very interesting. One of the effects of socialism and communism across genders was there were many female pilots. Even if you think for the IDF, okay, the Israeli Defense Army Forces. So there was a time that there were many female pilots. Like you had female women in the combat, you had women pilots. It was not even a question. And then I don't know what happened. I haven't studied that. That suddenly you didn't have women pilots. Suddenly, like you had to volunteer, and women had to fight to volunteer to be pilots in the army. And it's like, ah, when you look back and you're like, there were women pilots. So the good thing is that you could get away with army service if you had, if you were like me and you don't get along with anything that is structural, then it was easier being in the form of a woman. It's very easy relatively to being in the form of a man to not serve in a mandatory army service. It doesn't mean that you are not Martian. It just means that just like I served my countries in other ways. Not that I have to be apologetic about it, but but for men they did not have the ability to choose. And on the other hand, it's like if you do want to voluntarily do something, then you can do it as a woman as well. Why not? In high-flying world of female aviators, names such as Amelia Earhart, Amy Johnson immediately spring to mind, but almost forgotten is the English flyer Sheila Scott, who was born on this day, deserves praise and wider recognition too. So this is definitely I'm definitely going to she definitely deserves a spirit of matter if we have her chart. So I might do that on another time. But look, we talked about the trine with Venus, right? Look, let's look back at the chart. Let's look back at the chart. Okay, and I began this broadcast with a Venus hour on a Mars day, so female aviator. And here, okay, with this trine, with this grand trine, a Mars ruled Venus, okay, a woman, pilot. So, but there's definitely a point of an achievement or a point of recognition for a woman in an international sphere. So in this case, it's aviation. I don't have anything here to delineate aviation or people to do with aviation necessarily winning this recognition. But I thought they were talking about the plane. Okay, I thought Sheila was a plane. So, so no, Sheila was the pilot. And I, like, a female going on air, but or above the ocean, Uranus above the ocean. But I don't have any delineation for that. Just the interesting note that we have this Venus tapping into these two outer planets, and the spirit of the time. We have a single woman here that that is memorable. So that broke a record. Um, she did not receive financial rewards, but um, yeah, and died of cancer, unfortunately, age 66. It was published in April 2018 and updated in November 17, 2019. End of Ottoman Empire. So this happens in November 1922. This happens in April. Oh, but this happens before Uranus was in Pisces, I believe. The end of Ottoman Empire. This happens in 22 in general. So November 1922, the Sultanate was abolished, and Mehmed was Mehmed. Is that Mehmed, or it's not Muhammad, right? I don't know. Was expelled from the country. He is photographed above leaving his palace through the back door, um, where he would begin an exile in Italy that lasted until his death in 1926. Ataturk took over and formed modern Turkish Republic. So that's November 1922. This is September. So September we have another trine, and this trine, in the aftermath of this trine, we have again a dissolution. All the empires dissolve. In favor of new republics, new unions. So it's still, there's something, if you talk about the formation of republics of nations, like the Soviet Union, or the, like, United States, well, had Pluto on her sun, so definitely they needed to rejuvenate the definition of the state. I don't know, like, exactly what were the internal politics back then, but definitely not on the spot. And the notion of Uranus in Pisces, lack of boundaries, Pluto in Cancer, national boundaries. So we have, instead of empires, we're beginning to have big unions of countries that are not as big as an empire, but small countries begin to unite and form republics. Okay? There is a Republic of Turkey. It's no longer the Ottoman Empire. Okay? Ireland receives its own independence, or receives a bit of peace as Ireland, um, and even Germany or Italy will begin to form their own regimes that is more decentralized, that is more people focused, but also the people of your nation. There is this tension between big empires to small countries, and the midway, okay, is that trine, which form a rather large bodies in the international arenas, that care for their own people, but also share certain ideologies that are beyond the local. If you talk about capitalism versus communism, socialism, and unfortunately later fascism, and so on and so forth. Let's go a bit earlier to February 6, 1922. Let's go to the chart we began to look at first, but this is the fall of the Ottoman Empire. 17 November 1922. So this is about the Ottoman Empire. Italo-Turkish War, September. This 1911. It's not this. What does this do here? Gallipoli. Well, that's okay. Yeah. It's not really what happened on this day. Burning of Smyrna. The burning of Smyrna destroyed much of the port city of Smyrna, modern Izmir, Turkey, in September 1922. So that could be a major event that will lead to the fall of the Ottoman Empire, maybe. I don't know. Um, mm, 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 mm. 17. Okay. I don't see much. I don't know why I don't see much. This is 2012. You know, we talk about history, we talk about collective memory, there is also collective forgetting. And there is always the question of what happened that we don't know about. What was not in the news. Because Pluto is also hidden knowledge, so we might not be able to see everything. Um, let's see, Gregorian calendar. Okay. That's just nice, but yeah. It's a nice site, but it's not really useful for what I'm doing. So let's take 6th February. And this is only 1922. It's the most recent. Naja. It's the most recent trine between Uranus and Pluto. The 1922. Historical feminist birthdays. Washington Disarmament Conference treaties signed by the world superpower. That was pretty important. And unsurprisingly, I'm tired. Just as we're beginning to reach something. Disarming. Okay? The harmony of Uranus and Pluto. Disarming. Now, Uranus is explosion and Pluto is nuclear stuff. So perhaps keeping from explosion of nuclear stuff happening. Disarmament treaties. Archbishop Achille Ratti of Milan elected as Pope. By the way, February 21 would be worst U.S. aviation disaster to that time, kills 34 passengers and crew on the dirigible Roma after it crashes into power lines and explodes in Virginia. And this just happens, you know, just what, 2 weeks following that trine. So marine disaster because of explosion. Okay, so this is important. It's the worst disaster up to that time. 34 passengers and crew, so it killed people. The people. Uranus is the people. Also, the moon is the people, but Uranus is like you know, the people en masse. The moon is the people of a country, the common people. But what's common between them is the common people. So yeah, February 6th. This Archbishop, new Pope. Um, Pisces is also traditionally ruled by Jupiter, so revolution, there's a new pope, that can be the case. So shift of power in the religious institutions, maybe. Um, Conference on the limitations of armament between the world's major nations ended in Washington, D.C., with signing of the Washington Naval Treaty. Naval, so Neptune, the oceans, naval, navy, and the nine power China. I just want to read the whole through and then go back to this. For the eighth time in less than a year, the Senate of Portugal was reorganized with Antonio Maria de Silva. You see, that could easily be an essay, like if you're interested to delve into the astrology of Portugal and see what happened there, becoming a prime minister for the second time. So there's a bit of an upheaval. Um, a bit, eighth time. It feels good as an Israeli watching this because we only have 5 elections up to date, so we have 3 more to go, maybe. Becoming prime minister for the second time. Soviet Russia, the Cheka, was dissolved and replaced by the state political dictatorate. Cheka. So this is another important thing that happens with the dissolution of something and foundation of something new. The World Figure Skating Championships ended in Stockholm. Nice. Men's competition, well, okay. Patrick McNee was born. Haskell Wexler, Dennis Norden. And I want to go to the Naval Treaty. The Five Power Treaty. The major allies of World War I agreed to prevent armed race by limiting naval construction. It was negotiated at the Washington Naval Conference in Washington, D.C. from November 1921. The Trine, Uranus, and Pluto was also in 1921, so 1921, 1922, to February 1922. November to February. So November, December, October. December, October. November, December. December, January, February. So it's 3 months. I believe there has to be an eclipse, because 3 months sounds like an eclipse thingy. Was it in the shade of eclipse thingy? So from November to February 22. Yeah, am I right? Right, December, January, February. It's 3 months. So maybe there was an eclipse around then. I will get to that. Signed by the governments of UK, US, France, Italy, and Japan. It limited the construction of battleships. Imagine Japan, just a couple of years later. The construction of battleships, battle cruisers, and aircraft carriers by signatories. I'm surprised, because Uranus is the development of this technology. I would not expect that to be regulated. Maybe Pluto attempts to regulate here, but where was Saturn? Because this is not just the Pluto-Uranus thingy, to me. Where was Saturn? Saturn was in Libra, squaring this Pluto. And in conjuncting Uranus. So there's an attempt to regulate these battleships, the carrier ships, the construction. There's an attempt to regulate what cannot be regulated. So it's quite futile. What Saturn tries to do here is quite futile. It's kind of the rule that is meant to be broken. So, yeah. Not limited by the treaty, but those ships were limited to 10,000 tons displacement. So arms control, world after World War One, um, it would be effective from August 17, 1923, and expired in 1936, December 21, 1936. So there's another, if you're willing to look into that. Um, Negotiations, signatories, parties. Think about that. Like this is, think about Italy. Okay. Um, the treaty was concluded on February 6, 1922. Ratifications of the treaty were exchanged, and it was registered in the League of Nations Treaty Series on April 16, 1924. The League of Nations, before the United Nations. There is something funny that what is exacerbated? Have words. Yes, I wanted to say that exacerbated, but I had the word and I didn't remember the meaning or didn't know the particular meaning, so I like to know what I'm saying. So there was a problem that exacerbated to, yes, that's the correct use of it, um, to um, to the United Nations as well, and that is, if you look at the structure of the Security Council in the United States, a little bit of a moon, MUN, um, so Model UN Wisdom. The Security Council has what we call the P5, and the P5 are basically the countries that were winning the last World War. This happened in the League of Nations. Okay, we have the treaty being signed here by Japan and Italy, and then this continued on to the new faces of the world, which was the United Nations, and so the P5, of course, changed. Um, and what a P5 country can do, they can have a veto over a Security Council decision. Security Council is the only council that can order um, the trafficking of armed forces to other countries. Okay, if you want to have boots on ground to help Ukraine when Russia invaded, then you would need a Security Council decision. Now, who are the P5s? The countries that won the last World War. And you understand that there is an algorithmic issue with that, just like the International Court of Justice is in Den Haag. What happens if you want to litigate Netherlands? Yes, Den Haag is in Netherlands, and that's an innate problem of every algorithm. Um, I don't want to go cliche like Gödel and so, because that I don't think that that's necessarily one on one, but in every algorithm there are the loopholes, and there is the challenge that we are facing where we want to ensure a structure that allows for change but also ensure certain stability. And the countries that are governing certain stabilities, they transform. And so how do we account for that? How do we make flexible structures that are also solid? Flexibility and solidity that um, allows for rejuvenation but not degeneration of what we would like to actually preserve. It's a big question. We need to look at trees perhaps, um, but then trees are suffering, right? Like trees are being cut, so as wise as they are, trees are being cut, or trees are being um, rejuvenated, and that's just not something you can get away with. If one of your P5 countries is a country that commits atrocities against humanity, or it is also becoming from the innate position of being one of the P5, of being able to set a veto. Okay, we will never have armed invasion to the United States ordered by the current Security Council, because the United States is one of the P5. Same with Russia. Okay, think about China. Okay, and think about even if you put any country, the best country in the world, you put it in this position, that is elated over other nations, then you create an energy, like the energy congestion around this center that begins to, why did I say congeal? Because congeal is the opposite, I think, of what I want to say. It begins to congeal. Okay, perhaps begins to solidify. Okay, because the congealing is actually when you have inflammation. Let's say you have a wound and you have the little of those yellow bumps that are forming are to stop the blood, and then it is basically the blood congeals in a way that stops the blood from flowing out of your body. So I was thinking about the healing aspect of congealing, but here it's actually the congealing of some energy concentrations that solidifies and actually becomes stagnant. So now it's very difficult to litigate Netherlands in Den Haag, okay, the International Court of Justice. Now it's very difficult to internationally interfere with China or Russia or the United States. So it is by merit of the structure that these things happen. And so how would we want the structure of those, League of Nations, United Nations, whatnot, to allow for easier, smoother energy transformation, and what, being completely decentralized, we see natural, organic monopolies, hierarchies, empires beginning to form, and you don't want to demote. If somebody's doing very well in school, you don't want to demote them, but you also don't want them to have power over others that is, psychological, that is technological, that is whatnot, that enslaves others. So you need to decentralize. And then how do you decentralize? By raising the people up rather than demoting those who are leading down, right? And that's just a structural energy cords thingy that is going to show up in every structure. Um, mm, 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 mm. So this is why I was looking at the League of Nations and then the United Nations and the structure of the Security Council. So it's like we want to have some grown adults responsible, but by the merit of their the grown adults responsible, we need perhaps more rejuvenation around who are the P5 that is done structurally rather than waiting for a world war to shift the forces in the international sphere. Maybe, I don't know. Yes, my phone is tired now. Thank you. Going back, this was that treaty supposedly to disarm, like, no way it's going to work, and indeed it did not work. Hiroshima Nagasaki came for some reason, however unjustified the act. And of course there was the question of, if we talked about Hiroshima Nagasaki, how come United States was not judged in the International Court of Den Haag for atrocities against humanity or crime wars, while other nations that are doing something way less significant are being trialed all the time. I'm not saying unjustly, but there is also this question, if you are in the P5, it's very difficult to put you on trial for war crimes. That's the same situation that we're having with Russia right now. Like, Russia can veto. It's being trialed for that's just the innate structure. That's just the way the Security Council works. London Naval Treaty, Second London Naval Treaty. So this is 1930s already, but I want to look at the other 9-power treaty on China. So, 9-power treaty, there's a name in Japanese and traditional Chinese. They usually have this where you can press and listen to the pronunciation, because here it says Joyaku, in Chinese, Jiu Guo Gong Jiaoe. I'm sorry, I don't know how many mistakes I made. Was in 1922,
treaty affirming the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of China as per the open door policy. Okay, so open door policy is another term to look. But before that, let's just continue reading. Nine-part treaty was signed on 6 February 1922 by all the attendees to the Washington Naval Conference, Belgium, China, France, Great Britain, Italy, and Japan. Just a moment of, you know, thinking about these nations, the stories of these nations, what is happening in these nations today, what happened in some of these nations during World War II. The Netherlands and Portugal, and the United States. So, 9 countries. What is the open door policy? United States Secretary of State John Hay had issued the open door notes of November 1899. And in 1855, we had another trine between Uranus and Pluto, but that's probably not for this episode. Followed by a diplomatic circular in July 1900s, asking all of the major world powers with vested interest in China declare formally that they would maintain an open door to allow all nations equal rights and equal access to treaty ports influence. So this is a very maritime policy. It's like our ships can land in your ports, basically, for trade in China. So, fearing that the European powers and Japan were preparing to carve China up into colonies, Hay also added the provisions that China's territorial and administrative integrity should be maintained. And here we already have the seeds and the rootings of the conflict with Taiwan. Um, and we've seen, Russia being very aggressive towards Ukraine and towards other countries for the fear of the complete dissolution of the country. There are now talks about Texas wanting to individuate from the United States, if I'm not mistaken. So think about, what unites the republic, and then there's one country that says, hey, we want out. And the tremendous fear that all the countries, all those little cantons, those states that together comprise the country, would have similar desires. It's like, hey, we want to go on our own. The children leave them out. they want to individuate. They want to have their own lives, their own economies, their own rights, and their own sense of identity. And we are now definitely heading towards that. So China wants to preserve its territorial integrity uh, in the face of these threats, as well as keep an open door for international trade. Um, Although no nation specifically affirmed that Hay's proposal, he announced that each of the powers had granted consent in principle and treaties made after 1900 to make references to the open door policy. Nonetheless, competition between the various powers for special concession within the Ying dynasty, Imperial China for railroad rights, mining rights, loans, foreign trade ports, and privilege continued unabated. Unabated, probably unbothered. Yeah. Yeah, unbothered. Like it's without stopping. So if you're also non-American listening to this, that's what it means. The United States was especially leery. I'm learning new words today. Annoyed of Japanese designs on China after the Russo-Japanese War, 1904-1905, and the 21 Demands, 1915, and repeatedly signed agreements with Japanese government pledging to maintain a policy of equality in Manchuria and the rest of mainland China. These agreements concluded the Lansing-Ishii Agreement. Again, I don't know how many mistakes I make in pronunciations. Feel free to laugh at me. 1917,
which was soon shown to be completely ineffective.
So we see here a situation where, this trine between Uranus and Pluto could go many ways. There's definitely a desire to find an equilibrium between the nuclei of the family, the nation, the local, okay, caring for the locals, and a global humanitarian unity. Okay? There's an attempt to find this. And so it goes with trial and error. And the potentials were, and of course, if you're a large nation, then you need to reconsider how do I maintain the integrity of my big entity um, in the new world. So it can be you rejuvenate the way that you treat your citizens, you rejuvenate the way that you treat your countries, you give more responsibilities to the individual countries. Okay, if you think about the republics, there is this the national and there is the state law, um, as well as sometimes it really is the time to dissolve ties and to dissolve the big entity um, and form these individual entities and localize the markets in order to maintain the integrity of the international markets or the international sense of unity and structure. So it's a very sensitive diplomatic time, and we see here that, of course, it's going to be disrupted. Whichever you decide, it's going to be disrupted, and there is always this constant finding your power. And in the cosmos, planets, asteroids, cosmic bodies explode, and others are formed. And but when that happens on a mundane level, we have wars and stuff, and natural disasters. Um, so the effectiveness of both treaties was very temporary, um, and, and that was the spirit of the times. So I guess there were great hopes, but maybe the Neptunian effect of Pisces, if we talk about the outer planet that's associated with Pisces, the Neptunian desire for unity here created great hopes and great ideation that was only very, very partially to be realized, and there was needed um, the entire unity. And as the spirit of the times changed, there are many factors to reconsider. Just think about Pluto going into Leo, the power of shining, the power of Regulian natural leaders, the transformation of kingships that die, and now it's like the whole world needs to be rearranged. Um, and then Uranus going into Aries, so revolution in weapons, revolution in innovation, and so on and so forth. So the spirit of the times, huh? So this is for today's episode. Just got a glimpse in history of the last time Uranus and Pluto were trining. They did that in Cancer and Pisces, and now they're about to do that in Aquarius and Gemini. So I would need to kind of digress, and I leave you time to digress and think about what comes up from being exposed to all that much information. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.